The afternoon heat made everything shimmer on the highway. Yuki checked her rearview mirror one more time before merging into the right lane. She'd made this drive dozens of times before from her grandmother's house back to campus. It was supposed to be simple. 40 minutes of highway, some music playing softly, and her mind wandering to the assignment due next week. Her grandmother had sent her home with containers of homemade curry and rice, carefully packed in the trunk. The old woman always worried Yuki wasn't eating enough at college. "You study too much," she'd said in her accented English, pressing the warm containers into Yuki's hands. "You need proper food, not that cafeteria junk." Yuki smiled at the memory as she drove. At 20 years old, she was in her third year studying computer science. Her professors said she had real talent. Last semester, she'd gotten straight A's. Her mother was proud, though she never said it directly. That wasn't their way. Instead, she just nodded and said, "Keep working hard." The radio was playing something forgettable when Yuki noticed the speedometer. 67 in a 60 zone. Not terrible, but she eased off the gas anyway. Her mother had taught her to be careful. "You can't give them any reason," she'd said more than once. Yuki understood what she meant without asking. That's when she saw the lights. Red and blue flashed in her mirror, and her stomach dropped. For a moment, she hoped the patrol car would pass her, heading somewhere urgent. But no, the lights stayed behind her, and she knew. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she put on her turn signal and carefully pulled onto the shoulder. The highway stretched ahead of her, flat and endless. A few cars whooshed past. Her heart was beating too fast. "It's just a traffic stop," she told herself. "People get pulled over every day. Just be polite. Do what they say. It'll be fine." She put the car in park and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. Her mother's voice echoed in her head from all those talks they'd had over the years. Hands visible. No sudden movements. Say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. Be respectful. Don't argue, even if you're right. Through her side mirror, she watched the officer get out of his patrol car. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a kind of stiffness that made her nervous. He walked toward her car slowly, one hand resting near his belt. Yuki's mouth went dry. Officer Derek Morrison had been having a bad week. 3 car thefts in the area, 2 assault calls, and a domestic dispute that had turned ugly. He was tired, on edge. When he'd seen the Honda going a bit too fast, weaving slightly between lanes, something had pinged in his mind. His training told him to stay alert. Trust your instincts. Better safe than sorry. He approached the driver's side window and knocked. The girl inside looked young, maybe college age. Asian features, black hair pulled back in a ponytail. She rolled down her window and he could see her hands shaking on the wheel. "License and registration," Morrison said. His voice came out harder than he'd intended. "Yes, sir," Yuki said quietly. "My registration is in the glove compartment. Is it okay if I reach for it?" Morrison nodded, but his body tensed. The car thefts had been Hondas. Similar model to this one. He watched as the girl's hand moved toward the glove compartment. Yuki's fingers fumbled with the latch. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She could feel the officer's eyes on her, watching every movement. The glove compartment popped open, and she reached inside for the papers her mother had helped her organize months ago. Everything neat, everything in order, just like her mother taught her. But in that moment, everything went wrong. Morrison saw the movement as a reach. His mind, already primed by a week of stress and training that screamed threat assessment, made a calculation in a split second. His hand went to his holster. The weapon came out smooth and fast, muscle memory from hundreds of hours at the range. "Hands up." "Show me your hands." Yuki's world stopped. She'd been reaching for papers, and suddenly there was a gun, a real gun, pointed at her face through the open window. The registration fell from her fingers onto her lap. Her hands shot up and a sound came from her throat that wasn't quite a scream, more like a gasp of pure terror. "Please," she managed to say. "Please, I was just getting my registration. Don't move." Morrison's voice was loud now, sharp. His own heart was pounding. He radioed for backup with his free hand, never taking his eyes off the girl. "Possible 1039, need assistance." Cars were slowing down now. A truck driver leaned out his window, phone in hand, recording. A woman in a sedan looked horrified as she passed. Yuki could barely breathe. Her hands were still raised, trembling so badly she thought everyone could see. "This can't be happening," she thought. "I was just getting my registration. I did everything right." I did what Mom said. Tears started running down her face hot and fast. She couldn't stop them. Through her blurred vision, she could see the officer standing there, gun still pointed at her. He looked scared too, she realized. That somehow made it worse. I'm a student, she said, her voice breaking. I go to college. I was just visiting my grandmother, please. Morrison didn't lower his weapon. He'd committed now. He'd drawn on a civilian, called for backup, and there was no taking it back. His mind raced through justifications. She'd reached quickly. He'd felt threatened. Better to be wrong and alive than right and dead. That's what they taught in training, but looking at the crying girl with her hands up, papers scattered on her lap, he felt something twist in his gut. Another patrol car pulled up behind Morrison's vehicle. Officer Chen got out, taking in the scene. He walked up carefully, approaching the passenger side of Yuki's car. He could see the girl was terrified, tears streaming down her face, hands shaking in the air. What's the situation? Chen asked Morrison quietly. Suspicious movement reaching into the glove compartment. I felt threatened. Chen looked at the girl again. He'd been doing this job for 15 years. He'd seen actual threats. This wasn't one. This was a scared college kid who'd been reaching for her registration. But Morrison had already drawn his weapon. The situation was what it was now. Inside the car, Yuki's phone started buzzing. She could see it on the passenger seat, the screen lighting up. Mom. Her mother was calling, probably just checking in like she always did when Yuki made this drive. The phone buzzed again. And again. Sir, Chen said to Morrison. She's got a phone call coming in. Says Mom on the screen. Morrison glanced over. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. For a moment, everyone just stood there on the side of the highway, frozen in a tableau that felt unreal. A gun pointed at a college student. A phone ringing. Traffic slowing down to watch. Multiple cameras recording from passing cars. Maybe let her answer it, Chen suggested quietly. Might calm things down. Morrison considered it. His arm was getting tired from holding the weapon steady. This whole thing felt wrong now, but he couldn't see a way out that didn't make him look foolish. Okay, he finally said. Answer it slowly, put it on speaker. Yuki's right hand moved down, still shaking, and picked up the phone. She pressed the button, her thumb barely working. Hello? Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Yuki? Sweetie, are you okay? You sound upset. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, concerned. It was a voice that had testified in federal court, interrogated suspects and commanded respect in rooms full of senior law enforcement. It was the voice of Special Agent Michelle Tanaka of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and she was about to learn that her daughter was being held at gunpoint on the side of Interstate 95. Michelle Tanaka had been in a briefing when her phone buzzed the first time. She'd ignored it. The second buzz made her glance down. The third time, she excused herself and stepped into the hallway of the FBI field office. Something was wrong. She could hear it in her daughter's voice immediately. Mom. Yuki's voice was shaking, barely above a whisper. Mom, there's a police officer. He has his gun pointed at me. Michelle felt her blood run cold. 20 years in federal law enforcement had prepared her for a lot of things. Hostage negotiations, armed confrontations, terrorist threats. But nothing prepared you for hearing terror in your own child's voice. Okay, baby, listen to me. Michelle's voice shifted into what her colleagues called her command mode. Calm, steady, authoritative. Are you hurt? No, but good. Now tell me exactly what's happening. Slowly. Through the phone, Michelle could hear other voices. Male voices. Official sounding. Her mind was already working, cataloging information, building a picture of the situation. I got pulled over, Yuki said, and Michelle could hear her trying not to cry. I was reaching for my registration like you taught me. And then he pulled his gun. Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. I swear I didn't. I know you didn't, sweetheart. I know. Michelle was already moving, heading back to grab her jacket and badge. Put me on speakerphone. I need to talk to the officer. Morrison heard the change in the woman's voice through the speaker. It wasn't the soft, worried mother anymore. It was something else entirely. Something that made him straighten up involuntarily. This is Special Agent Michelle Tanaka with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the voice said. Clear, professional, with an edge like a blade. I need to speak with the supervising officer on scene. Morrison felt his stomach drop. FBI. The girl's mother was FBI. He glanced at Chen, who raised his eyebrows. This traffic stop had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. Ma'am, this is Officer Derek Morrison with the state police. Your daughter made a suspicious movement. Officer Morrison. Michelle's voice cut through his explanation. Is your weapon still drawn on my daughter? Morrison hesitated. Yes, ma'am. For safety purposes, how long has she had her hands raised? Approximately 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, has she made any threatening movements? Reached for anything? Shown any signs of aggression? Morrison looked at the crying girl in the car, hands still trembling in the air, tears running down her face. No, ma'am. Then I need you to holster your weapon. Right now. There was something in the FBI agent's voice that wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered by someone who was used to being obeyed. Morrison felt caught between protocol and the realization that he'd made a serious mistake. A 20-year-old college student reaching for her registration wasn't a threat. He knew it, Chen knew it, and now an FBI agent knew it. Officer Morrison, Michelle said when he didn't respond immediately. I'm currently 15 minutes from your location. I have already notified my supervisors of this situation. I will be there shortly. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you holster your weapon and step back from my daughter's vehicle. Are we clear? Morrison's hand finally lowered. The weapon went back in its holster. He took a step back from the car. Yuki's arms dropped, and she immediately covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Baby, are you there? Michelle's voice softened again, just for a moment. Yuki? I'm here, Yuki managed between sobs. I'm okay. He put it away. Good. Now listen to me carefully. Stay in your car. Don't get out unless they specifically order you to. Keep your hands visible. Be polite, do you understand? Yes, I'm coming right now. I'll be there in a few minutes. You're going to be fine. Michelle ended the call and grabbed her keys. Her supervisor, Agent Rodriguez, caught her in the hallway. Michelle, what's going on? She explained quickly, her voice tight with controlled anger. Rodriguez's face darkened. Go, he said. I'll make some calls. We'll handle this properly. Michelle was out the door in seconds. As she drove, her mind raced between two tracks. One was the mother, terrified for her daughter, wanting to pull her into her arms and never let go. The other was the federal agent, already building a case, remembering every detail, thinking about dash cam footage and official complaints and the long history of traffic stops that went wrong. She'd had the talk with Yuki so many times. How to behave during a traffic stop. Why it mattered. Why she had to be more careful than other kids. Yuki had listened, nodded, promised to be safe. And she'd done everything right. Everything. And it still hadn't been enough. Michelle's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Stay professional. Handle this the right way. But underneath the professional calm was a rage that burned hot and bright. Back on the highway, Yuki sat in her car with the phone in her lap. Her whole body was shaking. She could see Officer Morrison and Officer Chen talking by their patrol cars, glancing over at her occasionally. More cars were slowing down, people staring. She felt exposed, humiliated, terrified. Her grandmother's curry was still in the trunk, probably cold by now. She'd been thinking about her assignment, about the cute guy in her programming class, about whether she should get bangs. Normal college kid stuff. And now she was sitting on the side of the highway, her face wet with tears, trying to understand how getting pulled over had turned into having a gun pointed at her. Officer Chen walked over to her window. He looked uncomfortable. Miss, are you okay? Do you need water or anything? Yuki shook her head. She didn't trust her voice. Your mother is FBI? She nodded. Chen sighed. Look, I'm sorry about this. Things got escalated when they didn't need to. Your mom will be here soon. He walked back to Morrison, who was pacing by his patrol car. Chen could see the other officer was stressed, running his hand through his hair, checking his watch. They both knew this was going to become a whole thing. Internal affairs, reports, questions, the dash cam had recorded everything. Man, why didn't you just ask her to step out of the vehicle if you were worried? Chen said quietly. I reacted. She moved fast and I just... Morrison trailed off. There was no good explanation. He'd pulled his weapon on a college student during a routine traffic stop for going 7 miles over the speed limit. Her only crime had been reaching for her registration when asked. And now her mother, who happened to be an FBI agent, was on her way. Morrison had been a cop for 8 years. He'd never fired his weapon in the line of duty. Never had a serious complaint. He tried to be fair, to do the job right. But in that moment on the highway, something in his training or his instincts or his stress level had made him see danger where there wasn't any. He looked over at Yuki's car. She was still sitting there, arms wrapped around herself, staring straight ahead. She looked so young, so scared. And he'd done that to her. 15 minutes felt like an hour. Yuki watched cars pass, each one slowing down to gawk. She wondered if she was going to end up on social media. Asian girl held at gunpoint during traffic stop. The thought made her feel sick. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother, 2 minutes away. Stay calm, then she saw it. A dark sedan pulling onto the shoulder behind the patrol cars. The door opened and her mother stepped out. Even from a distance, Yuki could see the set of her shoulders, the way she moved. Her mother was in work mode, FBI mode. Michelle Tanaka was 52 years old, 5'5", with short black hair starting to gray at the temples. She wore a navy blazer and slacks. Her badge was clipped to her belt, visible. She walked toward the patrol cars with purpose, and both officers immediately straightened up. "Officer Morrison?" Michelle said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Special Agent Tanaka." She showed her credentials, though she'd already identified herself on the phone. "I need to see your supervising officer." I called him. "He's on his way." "Good." Michelle looked past him to her daughter's car. Every instinct screamed at her to run to Yuki, to hold her, to make sure she was really okay. But she forced herself to stay professional. "Handle this right. I'm going to check on my daughter now. Then we're going to have a conversation about what happened here." She walked to Yuki's car and opened the door. Yuki practically fell into her arms, sobbing. Michelle held her tight, one hand on the back of her daughter's head, and for just a moment she let herself be just a mother. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you. You're safe now." But over her daughter's shoulder, Michelle's eyes were hard as she looked at Officer Morrison. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Michelle held Yuki for a full minute before gently pulling back. She cupped her daughter's face in her hands, examining her like she used to when Yuki was little and came home from school with scraped knees. "Look at me," Michelle said softly. "Are you hurt anywhere? Did anyone touch you?" Yuki shook her head. "No, just scared." "Mom, I was so scared." "I know, baby. I know." Michelle brushed tears from her daughter's cheeks. Then her voice shifted, becoming more businesslike. "I need you to do something for me now." "Can you do that?" Yuki nodded. "I need you to sit in your car and wait. Don't talk to anyone except me. If any officer asks you questions, you tell them politely that you'd like to wait for your mother. Understand?" "Okay." "Good girl." Michelle squeezed her hand once, then straightened up and closed the car door. When she turned around, the mother was gone. Special Agent Tanaka was back. She walked toward Officer Morrison with measured steps. Chen had moved away, giving them space. Smart man, Michelle thought. He knew what was coming. "Officer Morrison, I need your badge number and the name of your supervising officer." Morrison recited the information. His voice was steady, but Michelle could see the tension in his jaw. "Good. He should be nervous." "Your dash cam was recording?" "Yes, ma'am." "Body cam?" "Yes, ma'am." Michelle pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. She began typing. "Walk me through what happened." "From the moment you decided to pull my daughter over," Morrison explained. "The speeding. The approach to the vehicle. Asking for license and registration. Yuki reaching for the glove compartment. His decision to draw his weapon." Michelle listened without interrupting. Her face gave nothing away. When he finished, she looked up from her phone. "You felt threatened?" "Yes, ma'am. In the moment, I assessed the situation as potentially dangerous." "What specifically made you feel threatened? Was my daughter verbally aggressive?" "No." "Did she make any sudden movements toward you?" "She reached into the glove compartment quickly. After you asked her for her registration, which is typically kept in a glove compartment." "Correct?" Morrison said nothing. Michelle continued typing. "Did my daughter identify where she was reaching before she reached?" Morrison hesitated. "Yes. She asked permission and stated she was reaching for her registration." "And you gave her permission to do so?" "Yes." Michelle's fingers moved across her phone screen. "So to clarify, my daughter, a 20-year-old college student with no criminal record, was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. When asked for documentation, she politely asked permission to retrieve it from her glove compartment. You granted permission. She then ached for the documents, and your response was to draw your service weapon and point it at her face." Is that accurate? The way she laid it out made it sound exactly as bad as it was. Morrison felt sweat forming on the back of his neck. I made a judgment call based on my training and experience. Your training tells you to draw your weapon on compliant civilians during routine traffic stops. When I feel threatened, Officer Morrison, Michelle's voice went cold. I've been in federal law enforcement for 20 years. I've pulled my weapon in the line of duty exactly 7 times. Each time there was an immediate, articulable threat to my life or the lives of others. Can you articulate what immediate threat a college student reaching for registration papers posed to you? Morrison opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't, not in a way that would hold up. A third patrol car pulled up. A man in his 50s got out wearing sergeant stripes. He took one look at the scene and his face went grim. He walked over to Morrison and Michelle. I'm Sergeant Phillips. I supervise this sector. Michelle introduced herself and showed her credentials again. Sergeant, I need to file a formal complaint regarding this incident. I also need copies of all dashcam and body cam footage from this stop. Phillips nodded slowly. Ma'am, I understand you're upset. Upset? Michelle's laugh was sharp and humorless. Sergeant, upset is finding out your daughter forgot to call. This is a civil rights violation. My daughter was held at gunpoint for following instructions during a traffic stop. If I weren't FBI, if I hadn't been able to get here quickly, who knows how this could have escalated. She turned to look at Yuki's car. Her daughter was visible through the window, still crying, arms wrapped around herself. Michelle felt that rage burning in her chest again, but she kept her voice level. That's my only child in that car. She's a good kid, straight A student, never been in trouble. She did everything right today. Everything I taught her, and she still ended up with a gun in her face. So no, Sergeant, I'm not just upset. I'm angry, and I want answers. Phillips looked at Morrison, who was staring at the ground. Officer Morrison, return to your vehicle. We'll discuss this at the station. Yes, sir. As Morrison walked away, Phillips turned back to Michelle. Agent Tanaka, I apologize for what happened here. This will be investigated thoroughly. You have my word. I'll hold you to that. Michelle handed him a card with her contact information. I want a copy of the dashcam footage by end of business today. I'm also filing a complaint with Internal Affairs, and I'll be documenting this incident in a report to my superiors. Understood. One more thing. Michelle's voice dropped lower. My daughter is traumatized. She's never going to forget today. And that's on your department. You train your officers to de-escalate. This was the opposite of that. Phillips had no good response. He nodded and walked back to confer with Morrison and Chen. Michelle stood there for a moment watching them. She knew how this would go. Internal investigation. Maybe a suspension for Morrison. Mandatory retraining. The department would protect itself. They always did. But she wasn't going to let this disappear. Not this time. She walked back to Yuki's car and opened the door again. Come on, sweetie. You're not driving home today. We'll get your car later, but no arguments. You're in shock. You shouldn't be driving. Yuki got out of the car on shaky legs. Michelle kept an arm around her, guiding her to the FBI sedan. As they walked past the patrol cars, Morrison was sitting in his vehicle with his head in his hands. Chen was leaning against his car, looking tired. Michelle got Yuki settled in the passenger seat and buckled her in like she was a child again. Then she walked around to the driver's side. Before she got in, Phillips approached. Agent Tanaka, is your daughter going to need medical attention? I'll take her to be checked out. For the record, we need her statement about what happened. Michelle's eyes narrowed. For the record, my daughter just had a gun pointed at her by one of your officers for no legitimate reason. She's not making any statements today. When she's ready, I'll bring her in with proper representation. You can wait. She got in the car and started the engine. As they pulled away from the scene, Yuki stared out the window. Mom, what's going to happen to that officer? I don't know yet, but we're going to make sure this gets handled properly. Everyone was recording. It's probably already online. Michelle hadn't thought about that. In today's world, someone had definitely filmed it. By tonight, it could be everywhere. The thought made her hands tighten on the steering wheel. We'll deal with that if we have to. Right now, I just want to get you home. They drove in silence for a while. Then Yuki said quietly, I did everything you told me to do. I was polite. I asked permission. I kept my hands visible, and it didn't matter. Those words hit Michelle harder than anything else that day, because Yuki was right. She'd done everything perfectly, followed every rule, been respectful and compliant, and she'd still had a weapon drawn on her. I know, baby. So what am I supposed to do next time? How do I stay safe if doing everything right isn't enough? Michelle didn't have an answer for that. She'd spent years telling herself that if she taught Yuki the right way to handle these situations, her daughter would be protected. But today proved that wasn't true. All the preparation, all the talks, all the rules, none of it guaranteed safety. We'll figure it out together, Michelle finally said. I promise. But even as she said it, she wasn't sure what that promise meant anymore. How do you protect your child from a system that's supposed to protect everyone? They pulled into the driveway of their house 40 minutes later. Yuki's father, David, came rushing out. He'd been calling Michelle's phone nonstop since she'd texted him about the incident. Yuki. He pulled his daughter into a hug. Are you okay? What happened? While Yuki explained through fresh tears, Michelle went inside and sat down at the kitchen table. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She'd held it together at the scene, stayed professional, done what needed to be done. But now, in the safety of her own home, the reality of what could have happened crashed over her. That gun could have gone off. A nervous finger on a trigger. One wrong move. One miscommunication. And instead of bringing her daughter home, Michelle could have been identifying her body. She put her face in her hands and let herself cry. The video showed up online that night. Michelle was sitting at her laptop, going through the dash cam footage the department had sent over, when David came into the study with his phone. Michelle, you need to see this. Someone had filmed the whole thing from their car. The angle was shaky, shot through a windshield, but it showed everything. Yuki's hands raised, Morrison with his weapon drawn. The long minutes of waiting. Michelle arriving and holding her daughter. The video had been posted 3 hours ago. It already had 50,000 views. The comments section was exactly what Michelle expected. People outraged. People defending the officer. People making it political. Some supportive comments, some racist ones that made her stomach turn. Everyone with an opinion about her daughter's worst moment. Can we get it taken down? David asked. Maybe, but it won't matter. Someone's already downloaded it, reposted it. It's out there now. Upstairs, Yuki was finally sleeping. The doctor Michelle had taken her to said she was physically fine, but prescribed something mild to help her rest. The first night after trauma was the hardest, he'd explained. The mind needs time to process. Michelle closed her laptop. We should try to sleep too, but sleep didn't come easily. Michelle lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. 20 years in the FBI, she'd worked civil rights cases, police misconduct. She knew the statistics by heart. She knew how these investigations went. She knew the chances of real consequences were slim. In the morning, her phone was flooded with messages. Colleagues from the bureau checking in. Friends who'd seen the video. Her mother, Yuki's grandmother, calling in a panic from her home. Michelle spent an hour reassuring her that Yuki was okay, that they were handling it, that everything would be fine. She wasn't sure she believed it herself. Yuki came downstairs around 10. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Did you see the video? She asked. Yes, everyone's going to know. Everyone at school. My professors. My friends. Yuki's voice was flat. I'm going to be that girl. The one from the video. Michelle wanted to tell her it would blow over, that people would forget, but she couldn't lie to her daughter. Maybe, for a little while, but the people who matter will understand. Will they? Yuki sat down at the kitchen table. Or are they going to think I must have done something wrong? That's what people always think, right? That there must be more to the story. David brought her coffee. Yuki, anyone who watches that video can see you didn't do anything wrong. Dad, half the comments are saying the officer was justified, that I should have kept my hands on the wheel, that I moved too fast. There's always an excuse. She was right, and they all knew it. Michelle sat down across from her. The department opened an internal investigation. I filed a formal complaint. I'm going to push this as far as it needs to go. And then what? Yuki looked at her mother. He gets suspe. Dead for a few weeks, takes a class, then goes back out there and does the same thing to someone else? I don't know. But we have to try. Yuki laughed, but there was no humor in it. You always told me the system works if you follow the rules. But I followed all the rules, Mom. Every single one. And I still had a gun pointed at me. So what does that tell you about the system? Michelle had no answer. Because Yuki was asking the same question she'd been asking herself all night. The next few days were hard. Michelle took time off work to stay with Yuki. Her daughter didn't want to go back to campus yet. Didn't want to face people. Didn't want to get in a car. I keep seeing it, Yuki said one afternoon. They were sitting on the back porch drinking tea. Every time I close my eyes. The gun, his face. I can't make it stop. It's going to take time. How much time? I don't know, sweetie. Everyone's different. Michelle had suggested therapy. Yuki had agreed. More because she knew it would make her mother feel better than because she thought it would help. The first appointment was scheduled for next week. The internal affairs investigation moved slowly. Michelle called Sergeant Phillips every other day for updates. The dashcam footage clearly showed Morrison's overreaction. Several witnesses had come forward. But the department was being careful, thorough. They wanted to make sure everything was done by the book. These things take time, Phillips told Michelle on one call. My daughter doesn't have time. Every day she's struggling with what happened. Every night she has nightmares. I understand, Agent Tanaka, but we have to follow procedure. Procedure, process, protocol. Michelle had built her career on those things, but now they felt like walls, barriers between her daughter and justice. 2 weeks after the incident, Michelle got a call from an attorney. His name was Richard Chen, no relation to Officer Chen. He'd seen the video. He specialized in civil rights cases. I'd like to help your daughter, he said. No charge, this kind of thing. It needs to be addressed, not just for her, but for everyone else who gets pulled over. Michelle met with him the next day. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a confident manner. Here's the reality, he said, laying out papers on the conference table. The criminal system probably won't give you much. Maybe Morrison gets suspended. Maybe he gets fired, though that's less likely. But a civil suit? That's where we can make real change. Hit the department in the budget. Make it expensive to train officers poorly. Make it expensive to ignore problems. This isn't about money, Michelle said, I know, but money is what makes departments change. They don't care about complaints. They care about lawsuits. We can push for policy changes as part of a settlement. Mandatory de-escalation training, body cam requirements, regular bias audits. Real reform, Michelle thought about it. Then she thought about Yuki upstairs in her room, still afraid to drive, still jumping at loud noises. Let me talk to my daughter. Yuki was hesitant at first. A lawsuit meant reliving everything, depositions, questions, maybe even a trial. I just want to forget about it, she said. I know, but Mr. Chen thinks we could use this to change things, so it doesn't happen to other people. What if it doesn't change anything? What if we go through all of that and nothing gets better? Then at least we tried. Yuki was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. Okay, if you think it's the right thing to do. I think it might be, but it's your decision. Let's do it. They met with the attorney again. He explained the process, what to expect, how long it might take. Yuki signed the papers with shaking hands. 3 weeks after the traffic stop, the police department released its findings. Officer Morrison was suspended for 30 days without pay. He was required to complete additional training on de-escalation and implicit bias. He would be on probation for 6 months, that was it. 30 days. Michelle read the report in her office. Her colleagues could see the fury on her face. Agent Rodriguez knocked on her door. It's not enough, she said before he could speak. I know. 30 days. That's what my daughter's trauma is worth to them. 30 days. Michelle, you know how these things go. The union protects them. The department protects itself. I know. I've seen it 100 times. But it was always other people's daughters. Other people's sons. Now it's mine. She stood up and started pacing. I've spent my whole career believing in the system, following the rules, trusting that if you do things right, justice happens. But what am I supposed to tell Yuki now? How do I look at her and say the system works when this is what justice looks like? Rodriguez didn't have an answer. That night, Michelle sat down with Yuki and told her about the department's decision. Yuki just nodded like she'd expected it. The lawsuit is still moving forward, Michelle said. That'll take longer, but we'll see it through. Okay, are you all right? Yuki looked at her mother. No, but I don't think I'm going to be all right for a while. It was the most honest thing anyone had said in weeks. The next day, Yuki's therapist called Michelle. She's making progress, Dr. Williams said, but she's angry. That's actually good. Anger is better than fear. It means she's processing. How angry? Angry enough to want to do something about what happened. She mentioned maybe speaking publicly about it. Michelle felt a chill. Publicly? She said she wants other people to know what it's like. Other young people, especially. She thinks if she tells her story, it might help someone else. After the call, Michelle found Yuki in her room. Laptop open, typing something. What are you working on? An article. About what happened. What it felt like. I'm going to send it to the campus newspaper. Michelle sat down on the bed. Are you sure you want to do that? Once it's out there. It's already out there, Mom. The video is everywhere. At least this way, people hear it from me. In my own words, Michelle read what Yuki had written so far. It was raw, honest, painful to read. But it was also powerful. This is really good, sweetheart. You think so? Yeah, I do. Yuki kept typing. Michelle watched her daughter, seeing something she hadn't seen in weeks. Determination. Purpose. Maybe even a little bit of hope. Mom? Yeah? I want to do more than just write about it. I want to actually change things. Like you do with your work. What do you mean? I don't know yet. But there has to be something. Some way to make sure this doesn't keep happening. Michelle squeezed her daughter's shoulder. We'll figure it out. Together. And for the first time since that day on the highway, Michelle felt like maybe they actually would. The article ran in the campus newspaper 2 weeks later. By that evening, it had been picked up by 3 major news outlets. By the next morning, Yuki's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She sat at the kitchen table reading the messages. Some were supportive. Some were hateful. A few made her hands shake. Michelle sat beside her, reading over her shoulder. You don't have to respond to any of these, Michelle said. You said what you needed to say. That's enough. But it wasn't enough for Yuki, not anymore. The anger Dr. Williams had mentioned was growing into something else. Something more focused, more determined. A professor from the law school wants to meet with me, Yuki said, scrolling through her emails. She runs a program on police reform. She thinks I should speak at an event they're organizing. Do you want to? Yuki looked at her mother. I'm terrified. But yeah, I think I do. The event was at the law school 3 weeks later. A panel discussion on traffic stops, racial profiling, and police accountability. Yuki was the last speaker. When she walked onto the stage, her legs felt like water. The auditorium was packed. Easily 200 people. She'd written down what she wanted to say, but when she looked at her notes, the words seemed wrong. Too formal. Too distant from what she'd actually experienced. So she folded the paper and put it aside. 2 months ago, I was driving home from my grandmother's house, she began. Her voice shook a little. I'm a computer science major. I get good grades. I've never been in trouble. And that day, I did everything I'd been taught to do during a traffic stop. I was polite. I asked permission before reaching for my registration. I kept my hands visible. She paused. The room was completely silent, and I still had a gun pointed at my face. For the next 10 minutes, Yuki told her story. She talked about the terror of that moment. The feeling of helplessness. The way her hands had shaken so badly she could barely hold her phone. She talked about the nightmares that followed. The anxiety. The fear of getting in a car. But the hardest part, she said, her voice steadier now, was realizing that doing everything right wasn't enough. My mom is FBI. She taught me exactly how to handle these situations, and I followed her instructions perfectly. But it didn't matter, because the problem isn't what we do. The problem is a system that sees some people as threats just for existing. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood. Yuki felt tears on her face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of fear. After the event, people lined up to talk to her. Students, professors, community activists. A young man told her he'd had a similar experience last year. A woman shared her son's story. Everyone had something to say, some connection to what Yuki had described. Michelle watched from the back of the room. She'd wanted to sit up front, but Yuki had asked her not to. I need to do this on my own, Mom. And she had. Michelle felt pride swelling in her chest mixed with sadness that her daughter had to be this brave in the first place. The lawsuit moved forward slowly. Depositions, document requests, back and forth with the police department's lawyers. Attorney Chen was patient, methodical. He told them it could take a year or more. Good cases take time, he said. We're not just asking for compensation. We're asking for systemic change. That's harder. But while the legal system ground forward, Yuki was making her own kind of change. She started speaking at more events. High schools. community centers, youth groups. She partnered with organizations working on police reform. She learned about policy, about legislation, about all the ways the system could be changed if enough people pushed for it. Michelle went with her sometimes, sitting in the audience watching her daughter transform. The scared girl from that day on the highway was still there, somewhere inside, but she was being joined by something else. An advocate, an activist, someone who'd taken her pain and turned it into purpose. 6 months after the incident, Yuki was invited to speak at a law enforcement conference. Michelle wasn't sure about this one. "These are the people who protect officers like Morrison," Michelle said. "They're not going to want to hear what you have to say." Maybe not, but they need to hear it anyway. The conference was huge. Hundreds of police officers, chiefs, and administrators from across the state. Yuki was one of several speakers on a panel about community relations. The others were all much older, all professionals. She was the only civilian, the only person who'd actually experienced what they were discussing. When it was her turn to speak, Yuki could feel the resistance in the room. Arms crossed, skeptical faces, but she told her story anyway. And this time, she added something new. "I know Officer Morrison didn't wake up that day planning to traumatize someone," she said. "I don't think he's a bad person. But he was trained in a way that made him see danger where there wasn't any. He was taught to prioritize his safety over everything else, even common sense, and that training almost ruined my life. It could have ended it." She looked out at the audience. Some officers were listening, really listening. "If you want communities to trust you, you have to show us we're not the enemy. You have to show us that our safety matters as much as yours, that our children matter, that we deserve to drive home from our grandmother's house without fearing for our lives." The applause was more scattered this time, but it was there. After the panel, 3 police chiefs approached her. They wanted to talk about training programs, about de-escalation, about how to make their departments better. One of them, a woman who'd been in law enforcement for 30 years, shook Yuki's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "We need to hear these stories, even when they're hard. Especially when they're hard." Michelle watched these conversations and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe things could actually change. The lawsuit settled 8 months after it was filed. The police department agreed to pay a significant amount in damages. More importantly, they agreed to policy changes, mandatory de-escalation training for all officers, regular bias audits, a civilian review board with real authority, body cameras required at all traffic stops. "It's not everything we wanted," Attorney Chen told them, "but it's real progress, meaningful change." Yuki read through the settlement agreement. "Will this actually make a difference? If they follow through?" "Yes, if they don't, we can take them back to court. This gives us leverage." Michelle put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You did this. You made this happen." "We did it," Yuki corrected. "Together." A year after the incident, Yuki changed her major. She added a double major in criminal justice alongside her computer science degree. When her advisor asked why, she had her answer ready. "I want to build systems that work better, both kinds, the technical ones and the human ones." She continued speaking at events, but she was also learning, reading everything she could about police reform, community relations, accountability measures. She started volunteering with organizations that worked on these issues. She learned about data analysis and how it could identify problematic patterns in policing. Her professors noticed. One of them, Dr. Patterson, pulled her aside after class. "You're doing important work, Yuki. Have you thought about graduate school? We could use people like you in policy research." The nightmares were less frequent now. Yuki could drive again without panic attacks, though she still got nervous during traffic stops. Michelle had taught her to immediately turn on her phone camera when she saw police lights, just in case. It was a sad precaution, but a necessary one. Sometimes late at night, Yuki would think about Officer Morrison. She'd learned he'd completed his suspension and additional training. He was back on patrol. She wondered if he thought about that day too. If he'd changed. If he'd learned anything, she hoped he had. She hoped the training made a difference. But she also knew that hoping wasn't enough. Real change required constant pressure, constant vigilance, constant work. "You've come so far," Michelle said one evening. They were sitting on the porch again, like they had in those early days after the incident, but everything was different now. "I still get scared sometimes," Yuki admitted. "I still see that gun when I close my eyes." I know. Some things stay with us, but I'm not just scared anymore. I'm also angry. And I'm determined. And I think that's okay. Michelle smiled. It's more than okay. It's powerful. 2 years after that day on the highway, Yuki graduated with honors. At the ceremony, she was recognized for her advocacy work and research on police reform. As she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Michelle stood and cheered, louder than anyone else in the auditorium. That night at the family celebration, Yuki's grandmother pulled her aside. "I'm proud of you," she said in Japanese. "You took something terrible and made it beautiful." "It's not beautiful, Grandma. It's just necessary. That's what makes it beautiful." Yuki hugged her grandmother tight. She thought about all the people she'd met over the past 2 years. All the stories she'd heard. All the families who'd lost loved ones to violence that could have been prevented. Her story had a happy ending, relatively speaking. She was alive. She was okay. Many others weren't that lucky. That's why the work mattered. That's why she couldn't stop. Michelle found her daughter standing by the window later, looking out at the street. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Everything, nothing, just wondering what comes next." "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Yuki turned and smiled at her mother. "I know. That's the only reason I made it through." They stood there together in comfortable silence. Outside, cars passed by on the street. Just regular people driving home, living their lives, probably not thinking about traffic stops or police reform or any of the things that had consumed Yuki's life for the past 2 years. But Yuki was thinking about them. About keeping them safe. About building a world where a routine traffic stop was just that. Routine, boring, forgettable. Not traumatic. Not terrifying. Not potentially deadly. It was a big goal. Maybe an impossible one. But as Michelle had taught her from a young age, impossible just meant it would take longer. And Yuki had time. She had determination. She had purpose. And most importantly, she had hope that tomorrow could be better than today. That was enough to keep going.